God is good, and I think a way that He blessed me is that I was born and raised here in North Carolina, and I legitimately love it here. And I know that I was born and raised here, but I do legitimately think this is one of the top 5 states in America. And a lot of people seem to agree with me because I kept up with a YouTube channel survey and like what's the best state in America. And the states that won out were Texas, which doesn't surprise me because Texas, a lot of people have Texas pride. Colorado, which doesn't surprise me either because Colorado is a very beautiful state, and North Carolina. And I think actually North Carolina won out in the end. And that doesn't surprise me because North Carolina is legitimately a great state to live in. And I know that geographically speaking, I have a very diverse audience. A lot of you are from many different states or even different countries altogether. And a big part of what really informs the channel, like subconsciously, I guess you would say, is that I am a North Carolinian. I was born and raised here, and the unique North Carolina way of life has really kind of informed me. And of course, so much of what you see in many of my videos is the natural beauty of North Carolina. And it's just a very beautiful state. So I thought it'd be very interesting to share with you. And I thought this would be the best time of year to share this with you because our state flower, the dogwood, okay, this one's a bit droopy, it's been unfortunately a bit bent, but that's our state flower, the dogwood, is in bloom. And personally, I prefer the pink dogwood over the white one. And I actually really like these pink-white dogwoods. They're mixed. But really, it's, I think, a good time to talk about North Carolina because our state flower is in bloom. And it's just a very beautiful state. And that's a big reason why I like North Carolina so much. It's a legitimately very beautiful state. In the west, we have the mountains. In the east, we have the coast. And a lot of states don't have that. And it's a very beautiful state. On the eastern part of the state, we have the Outer Banks, which are very unique geographic feature, unique to North Carolina. And then, of course, you have the eastern part of the state. You have the Piedmont, where I live. And then you have the Appalachian Mountains in the east. And I actually think the largest mountain in the Appalachian Mountains, if my memory serves me correctly, is actually in North Carolina, which is really cool to think about. And North Carolina is just legitimately a very beautiful state. In the eastern part of the state, except before you got the Outer Banks and a lot of the pretty lighthouses out there. And the coast of North Carolina is very beautiful. And then, of course, in the eastern part of the state, you have very flat. It's very, very, very flat. I can't stand it out there. It's so flat. But you do have like a lot of really cool like water pathways out there, like these really cool like canals and pathways that lead out to the sea. Those are really cool. You got marshland out there. Some of the more eastern part of the state, it's very flat and filled with a bunch of pine trees. But the great thing about North Carolina is the geography is so diverse. Where I live in the Piedmont or the foothills is, well, hills. They're like baby mountains, kind of. The foothills are like baby mountains, pretty much. Well, they used to be mountains, but they got worn down a very long time ago. And it still looks somewhat like the mountains, but it's also kind of its own thing. And it's just a very beautiful part of the state. And one of the cool things about all the foothills is that we have a bunch of creeks and rivers. Most of them are rainwater, like this one's a rainwater, but a lot of creeks and stuff are formed because of all the mountains, and that's really cool. And then, of course, in the western part of the state, we have the Appalachian Mountains, which, in my opinion, the Appalachian Mountains are the most beautiful part of America. I've been to many different parts of America, and it's so beautiful out there. Like, it's really incredibly beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And, I mean, maybe the Rockies could compete, but I really like the Appalachian Mountains, and the people are so down to earth out there. Unfortunately, it's very poor, but it is a very, very beautiful part of America. If you're an international viewer or a fellow American, I highly recommend visiting. And it's just very beautiful out there. And the whole state is rich in beauty. North Carolina still has a lot of open land, beautiful land, a lot of beautiful forests, beautiful pastures. And in the cities, and when I think about them, they're not like LA or New York. Even our biggest cities are not that developed, really. And the state is just still very beautiful. A lot of open land. Just a very beautiful state naturally. And the weather, I think, is really nice. Unlike a lot of other southern states, we actually have like seasons here. It's not just like the hot season and the cold season, which isn't really that cold. We actually have like seasons here. We do have all 4 seasons, and that's really nice. The winters, I guess you would say, are moderate, especially by Yankee standards. And one way you can tell people from the north around here is that they always complain about snow. Meanwhile, Southerners, we get very excited about snow because it's so rare. Here in North Carolina, it has not snowed in 2 years. And I had a friend from Florida. He came up when he was a kid, and the first time he ever saw snow was when it snowed here in North Carolina. It always, it's so weird looking at media, like Christmas movies and stuff, and they're always portraying this white Christmas, and you can always tell it's made by people of northern backgrounds because we don't have white Christmases here. If it snows in January, um, and it's only like maybe a few inches deep at the most. But and then the ground gets really soggy. But the winters are moderate here. The summers are hot, I guess you would say. They typically get around the upper 90s. It doesn't usually get to 100. But keep in mind that it's a lot of humidity. A lot of people aren't used to the humidity here where there's so much water in the air. I've experienced very hot, dry heat, and I can tell you that lower temperatures in humid heat feel like hotter temperatures in dry heat. And it is very hot, I guess you would say. I mean, you get used to it after a while. I mean, you never fully get used to it, but I mean, you are able to live in it after a while. I actually even somewhat have come to enjoy it. And it's actually, though the midday is very hot, the mornings and the nights are actually really nice. The mornings, the nights, and the afternoons are actually really nice in the summer. Like you can go out in the middle of the night and it be a really nice temperature. So I guess that's kind of the upside to it being so hot in the day. And the nights, the summer nights, it's getting down to at the darkest, it's getting down to maybe to the 60s, upper 60s. So very nice temperatures at the nights. Actually, I love the nights in North Carolina, and because we're a more rural state, we still have a bunch of stars and stuff. We still, of course, suffer from light pollution, but North Carolina nights are beautiful, and it's just such a beautiful state. There's so much wildlife here still. For instance, the Venus flytrap is actually native to the Carolinas. I don't think it's particularly native to my region of the state, but it is native here. But I mean, the trees are beautiful here. There's so much beauty in this part of the state. The pines are beautiful. The hardwoods are beautiful. There's a lot of rich beauty out here, very rich. And of course, so much of what you see on the channel is that North Carolina beauty. And it's just a very beautiful and a very diverse state. Another thing I like about North Carolina is the history and the culture. Let's start with the history. North Carolina is a very rich state in history. Technically speaking, it's the oldest state in the country because the Lost Colony, the first attempt at colonizing America by the English, was what would eventually become North Carolina. And North Carolina is one of the oldest states in the country. It's one of the original 13 colonies. And you can always tell our history books are written by Yankees because they always want to start things with Plymouth, Massachusetts. And it's like Jamestown, Virginia started in 1607. Plymouth, Massachusetts started in 1620. That's 13 years ahead of you. And the reason this country exists is because of Virginia and tobacco, not because of the Pilgrims. But that's a whole nother rant for another day. But North Carolina, we're very rich in history here. For instance, the state is named after King Charles. Our state capital is named after Sir Walter Raleigh. That's why we call it Raleigh. And in general, it's just a very culturally rich state. A lot of rich history here. And we do keep our heritage alive, though many of our ancestors came here hundreds of years ago. We still keep that heritage alive. For instance, we have there's a festival here where people, and I know people that have been, where like they'll dress up in Scottish kilts. And for the white population here, many of us are Scots-Irish in our descent. We came here hundreds of years ago. Unfortunately, there is, of course, a history of slavery here. This was a Confederate state. It's actually one of the later ones to join the Confederacy. I've always found it so strange how South Carolina was the first to leave the Union and North Carolina was the last to leave the Union. And unfortunately, there is a history of slavery in North Carolina. But on the bright side, because of that, I'm not saying it was good, but we do have a very large black population here, and we do have a lot of, I think, a very rich black culture here in North Carolina because of that. And those two cultures, intermix into a greater Southern culture in general. And there's, I think, just a very rich culture here. It's just a very rich culture, and it's a very diverse, I would say. North Carolina, ethnically and racially speaking, is a very diverse state, and that's actually something I like about it. We do have a very diverse culture, I think, here, and I think a really great culture. We're famously a very friendly culture. People from here are very friendly to strangers and stuff. And the food's really good. Just the food and the cooking is very good here, too. We have a lot of rich food. And what was I going to say? We also have, of course, sports teams. I'm not particularly into sports, but if you like sports, North Carolina is home to a lot of great colleges: NC State, UNC Chapel Hill, Duke, East Carolina, Appalachian, a lot of other schools, and therefore we have a lot of great. We have a lot of sports teams. North Carolina, we of course have. What is it now? We got a Duke, we got a NC State, we got the Tar Heels, all that stuff. And so if you like sports, you'll like North Carolina. We have a very rich basketball and football culture here. And it's just a lot of rich culture, I think, here. And it's just very rich, beautiful culture, I think. I know I keep saying that over and over again, but it's true. And it's just a lot of rich history, as I said here. For instance, like we have a history with gold and stuff. So like on the East Coast, for instance, you'll have like a history of pirates, like Blackbeard came around here some. And just all throughout the state, there's a lot of rich history. Just all throughout North Carolina, you'll find all sorts of random, interesting pieces of history. For instance, the first town in North Carolina is actually called Bath, which I think is really cool. And Bath's just a little town in the eastern part of the state. But North Carolina, a lot of very rich history here. And it's just, that's really cool to me. Once again, it's one of the oldest states in the United States. And I think that's really cool. Another really interesting thing about that culture is that we have a sister state. A lot of states don't really have sister states in the same way we do. Sometimes we act like we're one state, kind of, but we'll often just be called Carolina or call ourselves the Carolinas, opposed to just North and South Carolina. And we often act like we're one state. We have a sister state, which is really cool to us. And of course, there's that which is the better Carolina rivalry. Of course, North Carolina is clearly the better Carolina in every way. Sorry, South Carolina. Except for in South Carolina, we actually have to go down there to get our fireworks because North Carolina has a bunch of laws on fireworks and stuff. So we got to go buy fireworks from South Carolina. And that's another, I guess, perk, another interesting part of living in North Carolina is you got to go buy fireworks from South Carolina. And we just do have a very interesting culture here. And we even see it politically speaking. Like North Carolina, one thing I actually like about it is that we're not a one-party state. Like if you want to vote Republican, your party has a chance of winning. It's not like South Carolina where it's controlled by the Republican Party. And if you want to vote Democrat, your party has a chance of winning as well. So that's actually one nice thing about North Carolina is there's political diversity here. And it's just another really cool thing about our culture is the Cheerwine. Cheerwine is a uniquely Carolina thing. It also exists in South Carolina. We also invented Pepsi here in North Carolina, so we, I guess, have a really rich soft drink culture. We also have a bunch of uniquely Carolina, or at least local Southern restaurants like Bojangles or Cookout. Cookout's amazing. You should try it if you ever come by. What else do we have here that's like a local Southern restaurant that they don't have? Zaxby's. Well, that's a bit more of a thing, but they don't have that in a lot of America still. Zaxby's. I like Zaxby's, but they're a bit pricey. And we have a lot more restaurants, I would say, than a lot of the rest of the country. A lot of mom and pop stuff, because keep in mind, we have a great food culture here. So if you like getting fat, you'll love North Carolina because there's a lot of great food here. And another thing I like about North Carolina is the Christian culture. The American South is this big exception, kind of. It really kind of stands out to the rest of America. And it's not even that we're really that Christian. Most people here, for instance, don't go to church, just like the North. But because the rest of America, the North and the West, have become so increasingly secular, I know the Midwest is still fairly religious, but the American South stands out like a sore thumb for just how religious we are in comparison. And a large part of that, and I say this is someone that's not a Baptist, is because of the Baptist church. Baptist reigns supreme in North Carolina. You cannot go more than 5 miles without finding a Baptist church of some form. The Baptists are the supreme religion. Baptists exist like everywhere. And a really weird thing about Baptist Christianity is they focus so much on like an individual personal relationship with God, Jesus Christ. And I think because of that, Christianity has stayed so much stronger in the South because we focus so much on evangelism and a personal relationship and reading the Bible and stuff. Like evangelical Christianity comes from the South and then it's spread out everywhere else. And I'm not even an evangelical myself, but I do appreciate how religious North Carolina still really is. And even among the younger generation, though it's declining, we still have a lot of devout young Christian people here in North Carolina. Like there's a lot of really good churches around here, and if you're a Protestant, this place is heaven. For instance, churches that are liberal in the rest of the country, like the United Methodist Church, United Church of Christ, Evangelical Lutheran Church, actually have a bunch of really solid congregations here in North Carolina. And North Carolina, it's like you just have a lot to choose from religiously. A lot of great churches here in North Carolina. And another great thing about it, I guess, if you're unhappy with the church here in North Carolina, it's really not that hard to start your own church because very religious population. We're very picky with our churches. We don't like a church, we'll just go find another one. And very Christian culture here. Not as much as the Deep South, but very, very, very. I mean, I find this so funny. Like when this country started out, it was the North that was religious. New England, Pennsylvania, those were founded for religious purposes. Maryland used to be considered the South, but not anymore, I guess. Meanwhile, down here in North Carolina, the state religion was the Church of England, like many American states. But we weren't a very religious state starting out, and we became religious over time. And now we're a very religious state, and that's just so interesting to me. And we are a very religious culture, and it's really, it's just wonderful, I think, to see Christianity remain strong here. Yes, it's declining, but it's just a different kind of Christianity than you get in most of the rest of the country. It has a bunch of problems, but it also has, I think, many upsides. And yeah, I like how Christian, for instance, the dogwood flower, our state's flower, it makes a cross. And if my memory serves me correctly, Christ was crucified on dogwood, or at least that's the old story we were taught as children. And North Carolina, a lot of rich beauty. And another thing I like about North Carolina is there's still very much a down-to-earth culture here. Like in a lot of other parts of America, people have become so fake. But down here in North Carolina, there is I think people are still so real here. I talk about people are still friendly, but it's more than just being friendly. People are still real. I think that's a big part of why people are still so Christian. And I think a big part of that is that unlike a lot of the rest of the country, where a lot of jobs are just like these white-collar jobs, North Carolina, we still have a bunch of blue-collar and brown-collar work. The factory industry used to be strong. Like furniture used to be king around here, and tobacco too. Those have faded away, I think, unfortunately. I exist because of the furniture factories. Like my family, they came from the mountains and stuff to work in furniture. And a great pride of our state used to be the great furniture factories. And of course, tobacco. We are tobacco central. I know of several cities that are towns that are named directly after tobacco. And tobacco used to be king around here. And for instance, we are home of the Winston cigarette, or at least we used to be home of the Winston cigarette. And tobacco, North Carolina is famous for tobacco. But that industry has unfortunately kind of faded. Well, I guess fortunately, but it is just sad to see the jobs that went with it. And just North Carolina, we are a big agricultural state. Like we're like one of the top 10 producers in the nation. For instance, our state food, I think it's the sweet potato. I like sweet potatoes, and we produce a ton of sweet potatoes here. And we just grow a bunch of food. Agriculture is not the dominant industry. A lot of people that ain't from the South assume that agriculture is the dominant industry. It's not. But we do still have a very strong agricultural economy. And I think that's for our betterment. I think farmers are just more in tune with the world than people who are working offices all day. And we still have a lot of brown collar and blue collar work around here. And there's a lot of, for instance, construction. You like working in construction. There's a lot of work here in North Carolina. For instance, you don't have to actually in North Carolina, you don't have to have any paperwork or anything. You can just say that you're a carpenter, and you're a carpenter. It's interesting. And I think we have a very strong trade economy here. Like we have a lot of good trade schools, a lot of people going into the trades. And blue collar work is strong here. And I think people that work with their hands for a living opposed to their brains, they're a lot more just in tune with the world. And I think people around here, we're a lot more down to earth. Not to say we're perfect, but like it's just, I see so much of America. It feels like everything's going so fake. And I think a big reason why people are still so down to earth around here is that people work with their hands, work with their backs. People still do hard work. It ain't all on white collar jobs, like a lot of people, they go to university, and we do have a lot of good universities here, but I don't know. It's just, people are just less fake here. That's what I got to say. They're less fake. And, you can tell a very interesting difference I learned in a documentary years ago between northern culture and southern culture. It shows that we're less materialistic, not to brag or anything, because we are slowly moving the way of the north. Is that in conversation, a northerner will ask you, what do you do? Like, what do you do for a living? But a southerner will typically ask you where you're from. And like, when I ask somebody, next I asking what their name is, I ask, where are you from? And that's just like what we ask of you as southerners. We always want to know, where are you from? And that, because you can tell a lot about a person, where they're from, where they're born, where they're raised. And that's just a really interesting difference. And you'll still hear, where you're from. And of course, I like the accent. I know a lot of people are ashamed of the southern accent. Now, we don't have much of a deep of accent. Like, I could actually pass for a bit from not being so southern. People from like Alabama or Mississippi, it's undeniable. So our accents aren't as deep here, and they're unfortunately getting lighter. And that is, I don't know, something I worry about for the state's future is that everybody's coming here. The South is like the hot place to be, and it kind of upsets me in a way, because the reason why the South is so cheap is poverty. Like, poverty runs rampant here, like it is everywhere, and it really saddens me to see people, taking advantage of that, taking advantage of all the poverty here, just when we're starting to get out of poverty in the South. And I guess it's kind of inevitable. You got jobs and people are going to start coming in. But I ain't got nothing against people. Once again, we're very friendly to outsiders, and I know a lot of people from the North. And I've even met a lot of European immigrants, like very particularly European immigrants to this country. A lot of people moved to North Carolina. It's a very hot state to move to right now. That's why our electoral votes are going up. And it's just, I think, a good state to live in. But I do kind of worry that just the materialism and just how materialistic and how greedy American society is becoming. I worry, and of course I know it's happening here anyways, but I don't know. I guess I just worry about the acceleration of that trend towards materialism, or even just focusing away from the family. For instance, I see just among the younger generation, the fading away of manners. Like, Southern children are supposed to have manners, and you just don't see it as much anymore, and it's just sad to see. But nothing against Yankees, but it is just, I don't know. For instance, like, I've heard that like the Southern accent is slowly fading away, because as America, and particularly the South, becomes more and more, filled with all sorts of different kinds of people, like, accents are mixing together, like, and we're just moving towards this one homogenous American accent, which I think is horrible. I want people from Boston to sound like Bostonian. I don't want them to sound like me. I want people from Alabama to sound like they're from Alabama. Californians to sound like they're from California. I think it's awful to see the accents be diminished. I want strong accents. And I really do think it's very sad to see regional culture fade away. But one thing I love about North Carolina is the regional culture, and I haven't even gotten fully into it. Like the farming culture, the rural culture. Like, there's still such a strong agriculture and horticulture industry here, and a strong culture built around those things. And I really like that about North Carolina. But yeah, I really like it here. The state's very beautiful. We have a very long and a very rich history. The food's really good. People are down to earth. Of course, not perfect. Nowhere is perfect. Unfortunately, the cost of living is going up. That really sucks. But the really annoying thing is that wages are staying about the same. So we're still getting paid like Southerners. We're increasingly paying like Yankees when it comes to prices. So that really sucks. And that is definitely the biggest downside in North Carolina right now, is that the cost of living is going up, but the pay is staying about the same. So yeah, that actually, it does suck. But yeah, things are changing a lot. Of course, I live in rural Carolina. That's the thing. It's like the difference. North Carolina, it's like the big cities like Charlotte or Raleigh, they're starting to grow. But like rural North Carolina, it's like we're still poor out here. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself too poor. I think I've come from a fairly cushy background. Not rich, but not poor. I guess middle class, I would say. But, it is very sad to see rural and poverty throughout the cities and stuff. And it's like, where I come from, it's like when the furniture factories went, the towns have never recovered. It's like the bigger cities like Raleigh and Charlotte and stuff, they're doing good. But a lot of the rest of North Carolina, we're actually not doing all that great, because the factory work ain't there anymore, at least not to the same capacity. So it is a mixed state. A lot of poverty still. That's one of the biggest downsides to living here, is there's still so much poverty. It's getting better, but I mean, it's noticeably everywhere. It's very sad. But I think by and large, North Carolina is a very great state to live in. And I just kind of listed why I think the state is so great. But at the very least, I highly recommend checking it out. I think it's a great state to live in. And and you're probably get a howdy or something. Oh, actually, we don't typically say howdy all that much. You're gonna get you get a friendly greeting and stuff if you come here. I think it's a great state, and come and visit if you want. Well, y'all have a good day. God bless. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and yeah, that's about it. Christ will conquer.